Hi guys, welcome to video 7 of Unit 3, America's Revolution in the Early Republic from 1754 to 1800. Today we are going to move on and continue with our discussion of the federal government. We're going to be looking at 3.8, the Constitutional Convention and debates over ratification. So, first question is, what were some of the compromises made at the Constitutional Convention? Now, there were four really big compromises. That occurred when they created the Constitution at the Constitutional Convention. One of them was representation in a bicameral legislature. The other one was the development of an executive branch elected by the Electoral College. The third was the compromise over central versus state power in a federal system. And that one we'll actually talk more about in the next video. And the third one was compromises over slavery, particularly the 3/5 compromise. And I'm going to talk about each of these. So one thing to keep in mind was that when delegates came to the Constitutional Convention, the initial plan was mainly to fix the Articles of Confederation, but a number of the delegates came and sort of convinced people that, we can't just fix what's wrong with the Articles of Convention. It's not enough to just fix the weaknesses of the Articles. Madison and Hamilton in particular, James Madison and Alexander Hamilton, pressed for a completely new constitution, and they won out. Okay, so first big debate was the representation debate. How are the voices of the people represented? And there were two big plans here, the Virginia plan and the New Jersey plan. So the Virginia plan argued for a really strong central state and a bicameral legislature, so a legislature with two houses, okay, which is what we have today. Okay, we have a Senate and a House of Representatives. So Virginia argued that representatives should be based on population rather than an even number for every state. And this sort of makes sense because Virginia was a big state and had a really large population. So if they had decided representatives based on population, Virginia would have many more representatives than smaller states like, for example, New Jersey. The New Jersey plan suggested a unicameral legislature, that is one house. And New Jersey argued that just like the Constitutional Convention and just like the First Continental and Second Continental Congress, New Jersey argued that every state should have equal representatives. And this was really favored by small states. States that had really small populations would then have just as much say in the government as other states with larger populations. Essentially, this would give outsized power to smaller states because even though they have a much smaller amount of the population, they would still be represented by the exact same amount of representatives. Okay, so ultimately we see the Great Compromise happen, and this is what forms our representation today. The Great Compromise says, okay, we're going to have a bicameral legislature, two houses, the Senate and the House of Representatives, but the Senate will have equal representation. Okay, each state has two votes, which is, yes, what we have today. And then the House of Representatives will have representatives proportional to the population, which is, again, what we have today. Bigger states have more representatives, like California and Texas both have a lot of representatives in the House of Representatives, whereas states like Nevada or Wyoming have very few representatives. Okay, next big debate in the Constitutional Convention was the slave debate. Okay, should slaves count as population for the House of Representatives? And consider at this point, we do already have many northern states that are moving towards the idea of emancipation. Okay, it's a slow burn, but we do have northern states that are beginning to decide. I mean, these are states whose economies do not rest upon slavery. And increasingly, you're going to start to see state constitutions move towards abolishing slavery in their state. So this is already a little bit of a controversial topic. Even more so, these southern states that have huge amounts of slaves, well, the southern states are saying, hey, slaves are part of our population, so they should count as population for the House of Representatives. Northern states are saying, no, of course they can't count as representatives. If you're going to argue that they're chattel, that they're property, the same way any other thing you own is, then they can't also be people. So this was a very contentious debate, and it actually could have stopped the Constitution and the ratification of the Constitution from moving forward. So what ultimately happens is the 3/5 compromise. Essentially, they said, okay, 3/5 of the enslaved population could be counted as people, but 2/5 would not. So some were counted as people and some were not for the purposes of how many representatives they got in the House of Representatives. Additionally, they they decided to hold off on the ban of slavery. And when I say ban of slavery, I mean the ban of the slave trade. There was some discussion about whether or not the United States should ban the slave trade overall. And essentially, they kicked it down the line and said, okay, in 20 years, we'll ban the slave trade. And I want to clarify that this is not the ban of actual slavery. And perhaps the way I wrote this on the screen is a little bit confusing, but they didn't mean get rid of or abolish slavery. They meant get rid of people bringing in slaves from other places or importing slaves in Africa. And at this point, most of the Southern states representatives were okay with this because at this point, Southern states gave enough care to their slaves that they were reproducing, that they were having children. And then this, of course, introduces the new evil of Southern states are then able to steal slaves' children and sell them. So, but the ban on the slave trade is removed from the conversation for about 20 years, and it's set for in 1808 that the slave trade will be banned. Okay, in terms of voting on representatives, a couple things are decided. The House would be elected directly by the people for 2-year terms, whereas the Senate would be elected by the state legislatures for 6-year terms. By the way, that's no longer true. They are elected by people, the people of the state now. But at the time, it was decided the Senate should be elected by the state legislatures. The president, now this is an interesting compromise. The president was elected, they decided, by not a direct election whereby the people vote and each vote counts as a single vote, and then you tally up the total number and whoever has more becomes president. They decided to create a system called the Electoral College, which, yes, we still have today, and it's a bit crazy, to be completely honest. That means that the president is elected by states rather than the people. The states would choose electors to represent the population of the state. Now, the number of electors is based on population size. Essentially saying that, okay, the number of electors are going to be based on how many people you have. The more people you have in your state, the more electors. And the electors will be the ones who vote for the president. Now, the electors are supposed to do what the people in their state want. So the way this works is, and the way it still works today, is we in states vote, and then whoever gets the majority of votes in our states gets all the elector votes, which is a little crazy too, because if you consider if it's a really close election, like if one candidate gets 51 or 52% of the votes in their state, they then get all of the elector votes. So all of the people who voted for the other candidate, basically their vote sort of just disappears, which is a little bit nuts. And it's one of the reasons why in recent years we've had a couple elections in which the candidate wins the presidency but doesn't actually win the popular vote. Okay, so why did they do this? The goal here was to take the presidential election out of the hands of the people. Remember, I mentioned in the last video, there was starting to be this little bit of move to conservatism. A lot of the founding fathers were starting to really question, we don't want to overthrow the status quo. Is it really a good idea to let too many people have too much equality? Remember, the political leaders are usually wealthy merchants and planters, and they don't want to overthrow everything. They don't want to turn everything upside down. Again, they just wanted to get rid of the British. So increasingly, they say, we can't necessarily trust every person in this democratic experience. So essentially, they said, let's take the presidential election out of the hands of the people and put it into the hands of small, quote unquote, uniquely qualified group of people. And of course, you can read that as elite, wealthy people as opposed to commoners. So a little crazy that we still have that. Okay, next question. What were the opinions of the Federalists and Anti-Federalists in the debate over ratification? The Constitution was not universally approved of. Not every single person loved the idea of the Constitution. There was an argument over it. So the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists are going to have quite a debate. So after the convention, to actually make the Constitution our governing document, it had to be ratified by at least 9 out of the 13 states. So 9 out of the 13 states had to vote to ratify the Constitution. Okay, and there's two sides to this debate. As I said, the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists. The Federalists believed that the Constitution should be ratified. Now, the Federalists were mostly urban and commercial represented urban and commercial peoples. Okay, more people from cities, certainly more people from densely populated northern states. They wanted the Constitution to be ratified. They liked the idea of a strong central or federal government. The Federalist Papers are going to be a big part of this. The Federalist Papers were a series of papers written and published in newspapers, basically arguing in defense of the Constitution. It was originally supposed to be 25, and they ended up writing, I believe, I don't know, 87 or so. They were written by James Madison, John Jay, and Alexander Hamilton. And I have this little meme from Hamilton. As you can see, Hamilton actually wrote the vast majority of them. He wrote 51 of them. Okay, and these laid out the arguments for ratification and basically tried to convince people in these states that the Constitution should be ratified. Okay, so the Anti-Federalists, of course, as you might imagine, the Anti-Federalists were those who are opposed to the Constitution. People like George Clinton, Patrick Henry, Samuel Adams, George Mason. They wanted to block the Constitution. They felt that it had gone too far. Now, we mentioned one issue of the Articles of Confederation is the federal government had very little power to do almost anything. Well, the Anti-Federalist says we've overcorrected. This gives way too much power to the federal government, and this is at the expense of individual states. Their biggest argument was that the Constitution wouldn't protect people from intrusion of federal government into their lives. Their big issue was there was no Bill of Rights. There was no Bill of Rights attached to the Constitution yet that said that essentially said that, you know, there are certain rights that can't be infringed upon by the federal government. Now, the Federalists did win, but a big part of the reason why the Federalists won and they were able to get those at least 9 of those states to ratify the Constitution is because they compromised and promised that they would add a Bill of Rights to the Constitution. And in fact, the Bill of Rights represent the first 10 amendments to the Constitution, of which today we have 27 total. But the first 10 are what we commonly consider the Bill of Rights. And these are added all at the same time. There were 12 proposed, but 10 were actually added. And this Bill of Rights protected individual rights, protected people and states from the overreach of government power. And you're probably familiar with a lot of them. Like the first one is the First Amendment is the one that gives us a lot of those protections: the freedom of religion, freedom of the press, right to assemble, and there's a lot of others in there as well, packed into the rest of the amendments that you're probably pretty familiar with. Okay, so you can see the order in which the states ratified the Constitution. The first states were mostly small states. They felt that the strong central government would be able to protect them from the larger states. Massachusetts was the one who really demanded the Bill of Rights before they agreed to actually ratify it. And states like Virginia and New York, they had really big debates about whether or not this was a good idea. These were much larger states. But after New Hampshire ratified it, they had to get on board because at that point, 9 out of the 13 states had agreed and it was going to go through. Okay, guys, so that's it today for the Constitutional Convention and the ratification of the Constitution. We are going to be talking more about the Constitution in the next video, so stay tuned.